Honestly, it's a relief he's dead. That's what she said, out loud, at his funeral, with 400 people standing in the courtyard and his coffin still warm. Her name was Mei Lin. She was maybe 25. She wore the white robes of the Bai family like she'd been born holding a mirror, and she was talking about my great-grandfather. Zhang Hao, 7th rank alchemist, one of the 8 grand elders of the Pill Tower, back when that meant something. The man who spent the last 4 years of his life coughing blood into a silk cloth so nobody would notice, because he was busy teaching me. I was 12. I remember the exact texture of that morning. Gray sky, incense so thick you could chew it, my mother's hand on my shoulder, squeezing hard enough to bruise, which was her way of saying, don't. My father standing at the front with his jaw locked. My grandfather Chen lay beside him, 60 years old, staring at the floor tiles like he was trying to memorize them. And Mei Lin, walking the length of the courtyard with 2 attendants and a condolence gift she clearly hadn't paid for herself, saying it again in case anyone missed it. 400 years the Ye family has held a seat in the 5 great clans. 400 years. And now the last man in it who could refine anything worth naming is in a box. She looked around like she was pricing the furniture. It's not cruelty to say it, it's arithmetic. Here's the thing about grief. It's slow. It shows up late, it takes off its coat, it sits down and stays for a year. But humiliation is fast. Humiliation is instant. I felt my face go hot and I hated it because everybody could see. You have something to say, little one? She'd noticed me. Of course she'd noticed me. I was the only person in that courtyard looking at her instead of at the floor. The Ye family's great hope. She said it the way you'd read an ingredient off a label. I've heard about you. Formal alchemist at 7. Very impressive. My condolences on your prospects. And then she laughed. Not a big laugh, a small one tucked behind her hand, shared with her attendants, the kind you're supposed to overhear. I would like to tell you that I stayed calm, that I honored my great-grandfather's memory with dignified silence and let the ancestors handle it. What I actually said was, pick a pill. The courtyard went very quiet. I'm sorry? Any first-rank formula you like. You choose it, you supply the ingredients, you set the conditions. 3 attempts each. My voice came out steadier than I expected, which surprised both of us. If I lose, I take off this robe in front of everyone here, and I bow to you until you tell me to stop. Somebody behind me made a sound, my grandfather, I think. And if you lose, I said, you bow to my great-grandfather's coffin, and you give my family a 6th-rank pill. You could hear the incense burning. See, I need you to understand what I was actually doing, because from the outside it looked like a 12-year-old having a tantrum. A 6th-rank pill was worth more than most of the buildings in that district. And a 1st-rank pill is the alchemist equivalent of boiling an egg. Any Bai family disciple could make one in their sleep. I was offering to bet my dignity, my family's dignity, and the memory of the man in the box on a coin flip. Mei Lin thought about it for exactly as long as it took her to smile. Done. Because she wasn't going to pick an egg. She picked the Foundation Establishment pill. Technically 1st rank. Technically. It's the kind of formula alchemists write when they want other alchemists to know they're clever. 9 ingredients where 5 would do, 3 separate temperature windows, and a fusion step where 2 of the components actively despise each other and have to be introduced like divorced relatives at a wedding. She designed it herself. I found that out later. She carried it around the way some people carry a photo of their kids. 1st rank, she said sweetly, handing over the scroll. As agreed. As agreed, I said, and then I lit my flame. I should back up, but only a little, and only because you need one fact. When I was born, the sun went dark. I'm not being poetic. Midday, clear sky, and then the whole city was standing in the street, looking up, while starlight came down through a hole in the afternoon and poured itself into a screaming infant in a back room of the Ye family estate. My great-grandfather was in that room. He was 90-something and dying, and he had been dying for years, and he took one look at what was happening and decided to keep dying for a while longer instead. What came down into me that day settled somewhere behind my eyes and became a map. That's the only word I have for it, a star chart folded into my soul, with points of light on it waiting to be lit. Light 1, and something in me gets permanently better, faster, stronger, sharper. And 2 of those points had been burning since the day I was born, and one of them was fire. Not beast fire, not the sputtering little candle every apprentice alchemist scrapes together out of his own energy. Actual flame, silver white, mine from birth, and it cost me almost nothing to hold. I've spent my whole life listening to people describe alchemy as a discipline of patience and humility, and I want to be respectful about this, so let me put it delicately. I cheated. The foundation establishment pill took me 40 minutes. I want to say something dramatic happened. It didn't. The two ingredients that hated each other, and I held them apart with my soul, and cooked them until they got over it, and the pill came out round and clean and middle grade, which is one full grade above what her formula was supposed to produce. And I set it on the stone in front of 400 people and looked at Mei Lin and said nothing at all. The silence was the best thing I have ever purchased with 40 minutes of work. She bowed to the coffin. It took her a long time to bend. I watched every degree of it. The 6th rank pill arrived by courier 3 days later with no note. And here's the part I actually think about, all these years later. Not her face, not the pill, not the bow. It's that 400 people watched a 12-year-old boy save his family's name in a courtyard, and every single one of them walked out of there thinking the same thing. And the thing was, the Ye family has 1 good year left in it. They were being generous. Because the Ye family really was dying. Mei Lin was a monster, but she wasn't wrong. We were one of the 5 great clans of the pill domain. That sounds enormous. It is enormous, in the same way that a title deed is enormous. It means a lot right up until somebody asks you to prove it. Dan family, Cao family, Ye family, Chou family, Bai family. 5 names the pill tower recognized, 5 seats, 5 sets of privileges. And every 30 years, the pill tower ran an assessment to check whether you still deserved yours. We had come last in the previous one. We had a young, fire-ancient altar in the heart of our estate, 400 years old, older than the family, sitting on top of a vein of earth fire that had been quietly cooking our disciples' foundations since before anyone could remember. It was the reason we were a great clan instead of a large one. It had gone out 2 years before the funeral. Not damaged, not stolen, just out. Something down in the dark had clogged, and the fire stopped coming up, and 400 years of advantage stopped with it. My grandfather went down there personally and came back up with nothing to say. So that was our situation. A dead ancestor, a dead altar, a last place finish, 4 elders holding the roof up with their hands, and 1 12-year-old prodigy that everybody was very impressed by and nobody was betting on, which is roughly when I decided to leave home. My great-grandfather died in the middle of a sentence. I've never told anyone the sentence. He was in the courtyard behind the medicine hall, in the chair he'd been carried out to for the last 2 months because he refused to die indoors, and I came running in with a fire essence pill in both hands, like a cat presenting a bird. Fire essence pill is the hardest of the first-rank formulas. I'd failed it 11 times. 12 was fine. He picked it up. He rolled it in his fingers. He held it up against the light, and his face did something I had never seen it do, which was relax. He said, "Ah, there you." And that was it. Just like that. Middle of a word. The pill was still between his fingers when the elders came. I stood there for a while. Then I made a very specific promise, out loud, to a man who couldn't hear it, in a courtyard with nobody else in it. I said I would be an 8th rank alchemist, which was the thing he had spent 70 years reaching for and missed by 1 step, and which had killed him a little every year he missed it. I was 7. Anyway, that's the warm part. It gets colder. I told my family I wanted to travel. You have to understand how this landed. In their heads, I was a national treasure that had learned to walk. My father's expression when I asked was the expression of a man who has been asked whether he'd like to store his family's entire future in a wagon and drive it into the woods. The negotiation took 2 weeks. Final terms. 1 year, do not leave the pill domain, and Wang Bo goes with you. Wang Bo. Half a step from Dozong, meaning he could kill roughly anyone I was likely to meet. Purple lightning, no small talk, and a debt. My great-grandfather had pulled him out of something 40 years earlier, and he had never quite finished paying it back. He looked at me the way you look at a very expensive vase that has decided to go for a walk. 2 months into the trip, a girl put a knife in my stomach. I'd like to walk you through this properly because I've had a long time to think about it, and it still holds up as the single most useful thing that has ever happened to me. We found her in the forest. Alone, bruised, terrified, no weapon, hiding under the root of a tree from something that had apparently killed everyone she was traveling with. She was maybe 16, She cried when Wangbo pulled her out. She thanked me 11 times the first night. She slept curled against my arm for 3 nights because she said she couldn't stop shaking. On the 4th night, she waited until I was actually asleep, which showed patience, and put a dagger in under my ribs. Wangbo took her arm off before she could pull it out. That's why I'm here. I remember lying on my back in the dirt with my own blood on my hands, and I remember she was screaming, and I remember what I felt, and it wasn't rage, and it wasn't fear. It was embarrassment. Because I had read every book in my family's library, I knew the medicinal properties of 900 plants. I could tell you the exact temperature at which profound yang grass surrenders its essence. And a 16-year-old with no cultivation at all had walked up and taken me apart with 3 nights of crying. I killed her myself. I want to be honest about that. Wang Bo offered, and I said no, and I did it. And then I burned everything, and then I sat down and threw up. I was 13. I never got tricked like that again. Not once, not by anyone. And I've since met people who could bend space with a thought and lie better than they could breathe. Some part of me has been standing in that forest with a hole in my stomach ever since, and it turns out that's an extremely good bodyguard. Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. The city was called Qingyu, and it was for sale. Not literally. The city lord was a woman named Xiao Ru, 4-star Do Zong, and she had accumulated 7 husbands and 7 children with the calm efficiency of a woman doing inventory. 4 of those children were old enough to want the chair she was sitting in. She had announced that whoever won a public tournament would inherit the city, and then she had sat back to watch her offspring try to buy, poison, and stab their way to the front. I walked into that under the name Wei An, which is my mother's family name, because a Ye family badge in a strange city is a sign that says, "Please involve me in your problems." 4 heirs. 3 of them came to recruit Wang Bo within a day of watching him move. I picked the 4th. Qi Ya. No father anyone would name, which in a house like that is a permanent disqualification, and everybody knew it. 6-star Do Huang at an age where that shouldn't be possible. Ice attribute. She had the specific stillness of someone who has spent her entire life being the strongest person in a room where nobody will say so. I picked her because she was going to lose, and people who are going to lose pay better. She paid in a storage ring. In the ring, among the polite gifts, there was a black stone about the size of a fist. Meteorite stone. It's a curiosity. It helps beginners refine their energy slightly faster, which is why it's worth something, and why nobody hoards it. I held it and felt the star chart behind my eyes wake up and start drinking. 10 points of star essence out of 1 rock. 100 days of ordinary progress, gone in an afternoon, out of a paperweight that a Do Wang would have used to prop open a door. I looked at Qi Ya and said I'd be delighted to help. The tournament had 3 rounds, and the heirs had to fight personally, which meant Qi Ya was suddenly the favorite, which meant her brothers went shopping for external help. The eldest, Zheng Ming, came back with the Black Flame sect and a plan. There was a mountain range 200 li out with a demonic emperor living in it. 6th rank, peak, and the reason that mattered is that its bloodline ran back to dragons. Zheng Ming was going to go kill it and come back wearing the proof. I volunteered to go along and watch. I had a reason. It wasn't the one I gave. My star chart had been sitting in my soul for 13 years with no shape to it, just points of light and a promise. And the way you give it shape, the way you finish it, is you kill a demonic beast and take its soul and its blood into yourself. Not any beast, the strongest one you can survive. 2 9-star Do Huang elders of the Black Flame sect fought that serpent for most of a day. I watched from a ridge with a chi-concealing pill in me and my face wrapped, and I let them do it. They burned it down to almost nothing with a firestorm that turned an entire valley into slag. It was, genuinely, magnificent work. Then the serpent started to die, and everybody moved at once. Here's what I did. I had 3 bottles of beast fire in my ring, ordinary stuff, 5th rank, the sort of thing an alchemist keeps around for practice. I cracked all 3, cut my finger, and dropped a bead of blood into each. 3 fire beasts came up out of the ground, a wolf the size of a cart, 2 others. They weren't strong, that was never the point. They were loud, they were on fire, and they went straight for Tao Ran, who was the one man in that valley fast enough to reach the corpse before me. He had to deal with them. He had no choice. They were burning. And while every single person in that valley was looking at my very cheap distraction, I walked up to a dying serpent the size of a temple, put a sword through its eye, and took the 2 things in it that were worth anything. Wang Bo pulled me out with lightning before the dust settled. Zheng Ming got the corpse. He got to carry it home. He got a parade. I got the dragon essence, and I got the soul. And up on that ridge with my hands shaking, I felt the star chart in my soul finally close. Unicorn Fire Spirit Serpent. Everything I had went up by a factor of 10. Not 10%, 10 times. 7 star regions, 61 star palaces, and every single one of them a door I could open if I could find enough rocks. I lit 4 of them right there in the dark, and something in the Dragon Head region connected, and I learned that I could now make fire dragons out of thin air by wanting to. I sat on that ridge until sunrise, feeding on dragon essence, and I made myself stop. That's the part nobody believes. I had enough left in me to punch straight through to Do King. I stopped at 4-star Do Spirit and let the rest sit. Because a foundation you rush is a foundation you rebuild, and I had already decided I was going to live a very long time. Xiao Ru summoned me 11 days later. She knew everything. She knew about the dragon essence. She knew my real name, which she'd gotten out of Wang Bo's face rather than his mouth. She sat there in a room with no guards in it, which is the most threatening thing a person can do, and she smiled at me and told me she was going to forgive the theft, in exchange for a favor, unspecified, whenever she wanted it. I said no. I said I'd rather owe her something specific, and then I sold her an alliance instead. Qingyu City stands between the Ye family and trouble. The Ye family refines pills for Qingyu City at any rank we can reach, forever. 2 families, 1 contract, no open-ended debt hanging over my head for the rest of my life. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she asked if I'd like to marry her daughter. I said no to that too, which, in hindsight, was 1 no too many. But you have to understand I was 13 and had recently been stabbed by the last woman who was nice to me. Xia won her city. We said goodbye on a hill outside it. She's the reason a Dodzun eventually walked into Ye City to shake my grandfather's hand, but that's later. I want to tell you about the rabbit. Venerable Gu, a 7th-rank alchemist I'd befriended by beating his grandson in a tournament, and I promise we'll come back to the grandson. He becomes important, and he becomes very funny, told me where meteorite stones come from. They come from a valley in the Pill domain that's wrapped in fog so thick your soul can't see through it. He and a friend went in there 40 years ago. They came out a month later without knowing how. I went in immediately, obviously. The fog cut my soul perception from 1,000 meters to 100, visibility 5 paces. I lost Wang Bo in the first hour chasing a white fox, which sounds stupid and was, except the fox had eyes that see through any mist, and I caught it, and it is currently a very fat pet in my family's estate. And then something came out of the fog at me that was 9 meters tall and made of silver. It was shaped like a bear. It was not a bear. My starfire went through its outer shell like the shell wasn't there, which no fire should do, and when it finally came apart, it didn't leave a body. It left a rock. A meteorite stone the size of my fist, twice as rich as anything on the market. The things in that fog weren't animals. They were shells. Somebody had built them around meteorite cores and left them in there to grow. And they ate each other, and the winners got bigger, and the rocks inside them got bigger too. So I did the sensible thing, which was hunt them. And Wang Bo and I killed our way inward for a week, and eventually we hit the inner valley. And the inner valley had about 1,000 of them in it, and some of them could fly. We were going to die. I want to be clear about that. That wasn't a close fight. That was 2 people at the bottom of a well with the lid coming down. Wang Bo had already decided to hold the ground ones so I could reach the fog. And then everything stopped. Every beast in that valley dropped flat. And a rabbit came out of the air. A gray rabbit. Ordinary, the kind of thing you'd see in a field and not look at twice, except the world felt like it couldn't take the weight of it, hopping. Its first words were, and I am quoting exactly, "Ugh, just kill them." Then it noticed the star power in me and changed its mind, which I have thought about roughly once a week ever since. It dragged me to the deepest part of the valley, dropped me on my face next to a smooth silver boulder, and told me to go in. There was no door. I told it there was no door. It told me it would kill me. I put star power into the rock, and the rock turned into water, and I fell through. What was inside was a sky, not a room made to look like a sky, black, endless, and hung with stars the size of moons that poured down light you could catch in your hand, and it was cold, and it was the loneliest place I have ever stood. One of those stars turned itself into a pillar of light and came down on me, and it would have dissolved me on the spot if my starfire hadn't decided, entirely on its own, that we were family. And at the bottom of the light, there was a ring. Here's what was in it. A cauldron, silver, 10 feet tall, and it took one look at me and shrank down and stamped itself directly onto my soul without asking. Fourth on the heavenly cauldron ranking, above Wei Kong's black demon cauldron, above anything the pill tower had ever owned. It had been born out of the essence of an ancient star, and it had been waiting in a ring for longer than my continent had history. A cultivation art, star divination art, heaven rank, advanced grade, which for context is a full tier above anything that had surfaced on the entire continent in 300 years. And then I read the requirement line and nearly threw it into the void, because it said, only those with an innate star physique may cultivate this, which I did not have. I sat in an endless starry sky, holding the single greatest cultivation art anyone alive had ever seen, entirely unable to read past the title page, and I said several words I had learned from mercenaries. Then I found the next item in the ring. Star Spirit, consumed to gain an acquired primordial star body, allowing cultivation of the star divination art. He'd had it, the whole time. He'd just put it second. Whoever left that legacy had a sense of humor, and I hope to meet him someday so I can tell him it wasn't funny. I swallowed it, and a white cocoon closed over me for 2 months. When I came out, the rabbit was waiting, and I finally understood what it actually was. It wasn't a guardian, it was a prisoner. Some Do Di, an emperor, one of the terrifying old ones from before the continent went quiet, had tricked it into an oath 10,000 years ago and left it in a hole to babysit a ring until somebody worthy showed up. And the reason it had been so casual about murdering me is that it was extremely tired. It used my ring to unlock whatever was on it. Then it went up into the sky and inhaled every single one of those 1,000 beasts at once. All of them. The flyers, the mountain-sized ones, all of it. All of that pure energy funneling down into a body the size of a loaf of bread. Then it burped and said, and again I quote, only 70%. Then it tore a hole in the world and went home, to somewhere it called the Starry Universe, and I have not seen it since. I want you to hold on to that, because it matters later in a way that nearly gets me killed. Somebody very large watched that hole open, and then that somebody went looking for whoever had been standing next to it. But at the time, all I knew was that every meteorite in the valley had gone dead with the beasts, my supply was gone forever, and I was standing in an empty crater with a Do Di's inheritance in my pocket at 14 years old. I burned the last of the dragon essence and came out of that valley an 8-star Do King. I also came out 4 inches taller, which ruined all my clothes and is the single most annoying consequence of any of this. I walked into Holy Pill City for the first time wearing sleeves I'd cut off with a knife, looking less like the heir to a great clan and more like a man who had recently lost a fight with a hedge. Then I took the Pill Tower's public examination and deliberately registered as 5th rank. I was 6th, comfortably, and the 3rd elder of my family found out and nearly took my head off because a 15-year-old 6th rank alchemist from a 5 great clan walked straight into the Pill Tower as a core disciple, and that would have saved my family instantly. I told him I had somewhere to be first. I could not tell him where or why, because the answer was, I know things about the future of this continent, and I read them in a book. I'm going to say that plainly once and then never explain it again, because explaining it is boring and living it is not. I've been here since I was born, but I wasn't born here. Before this, there was another life, in a world with no cultivation in it at all, and in that life, this world was a story. I read it, all of it. I know who the hero of this world is, a boy in a small city on a distant continent who has not started suffering yet, and I know the shape of the disasters coming for everyone in it, and I know where several extremely valuable objects are currently sitting unattended, which is why, at 15, I told my family I was going west. There was a heavenly flame in a desert on the northwest continent, and I knew which desert. Real name for what I was doing? Theft, with excellent timing. The northwest continent is a backwater, and I mean that with affection. 9 empires nobody in the Central Plains could name. The strongest man in most of them was a Do Huang. The spatial wormhole out of the capital charged me an exit fee on top of the entrance fee, which, I want it noted, is the single most outrageous thing that happened to me on that entire journey, including the assassination attempt, which happened 4 hours later. I'd auctioned a few pills to get walking around money. One of them was an exploding king pill, which forcibly rockets you to peak Do King for 10 minutes and then destroys your meridians as a service charge. It sold for 3.9 million gold to 2 bidding factions, and I bought a dead tiger with the proceeds. and 3 men in black robes decided that a boy who could casually produce 6th-rank pills was worth killing on the road out of town. I let them. I sent Wang Bo into the shadows before I left the auction house, walked out of that city alone at night in expensive clothes, and gave every predator within a mile a clean shot at me. Because the alternative was spending my entire trip wondering which rooftop had somebody on it. They were the 3 elders of Mulan, and they had something genuinely worth having. An ancient art that fuses 3 cultivators into one, so that one of them always has dozong power, and the other 2 feed it to him, rotating faster than you can hit. Wang Bo solved it in about 4 minutes by being faster than the rotation and killing the one nobody was defending. I got 3 scrolls out of it. 3 beasts' desolate skill. I'd been eyeing it since I watched them use it, and I want to note, because it comes up, I later gave that art to 3 men I recruited off the ground in the Black Corner region, and it turned 3 mid-tier thugs into a dozong-grade weapon that my family still uses. Best return on investment of my life, and I stole it from a man who was trying to murder me. Then I went and looked at the boy this world was written about. Wutan City, Black Stone. The Shao family estate, backed onto a mountain. He was 11. He was being chased through the woods by a furious girl in family uniform, and he was arguing his innocence at the top of his lungs while running, which was a bad look given the specifics of the accusation. That was Li Wei. That was the protagonist of the entire world. He was a small, loud boy losing an argument, and in about a year, he was going to lose everything he had, and I stood on a hill and looked at him and decided not to interfere. Not out of respect, I want to be exact. I had 2 reasons. 1, there was a dark attribute Do Huang hiding in that estate that even Wang Bo nearly missed, and whoever put him there wasn't someone I could afford to notice me. 2, in a quiet courtyard on the other side of the compound, a girl in purple opened her eyes. I never touched her. I never got within 400 meters. My soul brushed the estate for maybe 3 seconds, and a golden flame behind her eyes told her somebody was looking, and she sent her guard out to sweep the grounds. Su Jin, ancient clan. The 4th flame on the heavenly flame ranking, in the body of a girl who had not yet finished growing. I left the same afternoon. Fast. Then I went and collected 2 people who were going to change my family's future, and I did it in the ugliest way possible, and I've never fully made peace with the first one. The girl was 10. She was working in a medicine shop in a nothing town at the edge of a monster forest, and the shop knew her as Xiao Li, and she had been studying healing with a desperation that 10-year-olds do not normally have. I already knew why. There's a physique called the Calamity Poison Body. It shows up once a century. The person who has it can devour poison to grow stronger, without limit, and when it eventually goes off, it kills everything within several miles, including everyone who loves them, and they cannot control it. The way you identify it is a faint 7-colored line on the abdomen, so I dragged a terrified child across a shop floor with my soul power and pulled up the hem of her jacket in front of witnesses, and yes, it looked exactly as bad as it sounds, and the shop assistant went the color of paper. I found the line. Then I took her outside and I told her the truth, all of it, what she was, why the village she grew up in died, why her mother died, and that it was going to happen again and again, and she would never be able to stop it. She passed out in the street. When she woke up, she was completely calm. 10 years old, sitting up in a rented bed, and the first thing she said was, "I'm the Calamity Poison Body, aren't I?" I said yes. She asked if I wanted her power. I said no. I said I wanted her, and that I had a way to make the physique hers instead of the other way around, and that if she came with me, she would grow up like a normal girl and eventually become one of the most dangerous people on this continent, and that those 2 things were not in conflict. She thought about it for a while. Then she said all right because she had nothing else, and I have spent a long time being aware that this was not really a choice I gave her. I named her Yuer. She's currently capable of ending a city. She still makes wound salve by hand, badly, out of the recipes I taught her on a bird's back when she was 10, because she wanted to be someone who healed people, and I never had the heart to tell her to stop. The second one I did better, and only because somebody else got there first. Stone Desert City, edge of the Tagore Desert. A woman was being shaken down in a shop by a bald mercenary who had decided that her price for a stalk of flame grass was 1 night with him, and the entire shop was watching and enjoying it. She had a child behind her, wrapped head to foot in black cloth in desert heat, and she was standing in front of the child like a leopard. And Yuer, 10 years old, 3 days into knowing me, still frightened of me, pulled my sleeve and asked if we could help them. I said yes. I want to be honest about the fact that I already knew who the child was and would have done it anyway. But she asked first. That matters to me. I didn't argue with the mercenary. A thread of silver fire went across his throat, and his head came off and rolled, and there was no blood at all, just the smell of it. And I turned Yure's face into my shoulder before she could look, and said, "Don't look back." Then I knelt down in front of a terrified little girl and pulled her sleeve up. Green scales. Right along the wrist, catching the light like set stones. Her mother went rigid because she had spent 8 years watching people react to those scales. I said, "Those are beautiful scales." The kid froze. I found out later that this was the first time in her life anybody had said anything about the scales that wasn't followed by a boot. Her name is Anhua. Her eyes are the triple jade green snake flower pupils, and she is now capable of enslaving anything with scales up to and including things that could level a sect. Her mother looked at me for about a year and a half like I was a pervert, which, in fairness, was an entirely reasonable read of the available evidence. The desert had a queen in it. Everyone in the Jiama Empire knew about Nagaya the way people know about weather. Peak Do Huang, one of a line of snake people queens, and she had spent decades making sure no human army ever came further than the dunes. The polite approach would have been to sneak. I flew straight in on a giant eagle, got intercepted by a 5-star tribal leader named Feng Ying, who told me she would die before she guided humans to her queen, had Wang Bo freeze her in place with spatial power, and then flew her to the holy city as a passenger. Look, I had a schedule. Nagaya came out of a fold in the air above her own city walls, and I want to describe what that was like because I've met a lot of dangerous women since, and she is still the benchmark. Purple, coiled, a snake tail sweeping slow behind her like it was bored, and a face that had clearly been ruining men's judgment for a very long time, worn by someone who had never once found that interesting. The first thing she did was demand a gift for my rudeness. The second thing she did was find out I was a 6th-rank alchemist and completely change her tone, because the snake people had 400 years of collected treasures and nobody who could turn any of it into medicine. So I made her an offer. I told her I knew about the evolution, that a Nagaya at peak Do Huang can burn herself down in a heavenly flame and come back out as a 7-colored sky-swallowing python with a human body and Do Zong strength. I told her the success rate was under 1 in 10, and that most of what killed them wasn't the fire, it was that the soul went to sleep during it and something else woke up in the new body. And I told her I could fix that, for 10 years of service to my family. 8 tribal leaders started shouting at once. She raised one hand and they all stopped, and she said yes. The flame was in a magma sea a very long way down. We went in together and it got hot enough that she had to shrink her barrier around us both, twice, until we were pressed against each other in a bubble the size of a wardrobe, about 2,000 feet under a desert, both of us staring straight ahead with tremendous dedication. Neither of us has ever mentioned it. We have both thought about it constantly for years. The green lotus core flame was sitting on a jade throne of its own roots, and here is the part I'm actually proud of. She was going to rip it out. That's what she'd have done alone. That's what she does in the story I read, and it hurts her, badly, because a heavenly flame torn off its nurturing seat goes feral. I stopped her. I explained that the throne suppresses the flame, that you cut the lotus free with a jade tool and take the throne with it, and that the flame comes quietly if you don't insult it. And when she looked at the roots underneath, greedily, because they were visibly drinking the magma, and suggested we take those too, I said no. I said leave the roots. In 1,000 years there'll be another lotus. Take the roots, and there'll never be one again. She went quiet. Then she said, I didn't expect you to have that in you. Alchemists have a rule about not killing the source. Most of them ignore it. My great-grandfather beat it into me at 6 years old with a switch, and it turns out it's the only reason the queen of the snake people ever decided I might be worth following. She burned. I stood on the shore of a freezing spring on an island in the middle of a poisoned lake and watched a woman set herself on fire on purpose and then get struck by heaven's lightning for the crime of surviving it. What came out of the ashes was a 7-colored snake half a foot long, and then it was a woman with legs, and I turned around so fast I nearly fell in the water. Perfect evolution, soul intact, first one in the recorded history of her people. She asked me to call her Hua Yen. I asked if that was her name. She said, Nagaya queens don't have names. She said Dai was the name of an old friend, and something crossed her face, and I decided not to pull that thread. I still haven't. Then I went and dismantled a man's entire life in about 90 seconds, and I felt nothing about it whatsoever. Wu Jiang, Pill Emperor of the Black Corner region. 6th rank, Sea Heart Flame, 15th on the ranking, and roughly 90% of the collected knowledge of the greatest alchemist of the previous generation. He got that collection by ambushing the man who taught him. Wang Bo went to a valley outside his city and invited him politely, and Wu Jiang came because a Dozong asking for a favor is a Dozong who owes you one. Wang Bo's opening line, which I wrote for him, and which he delivered flatly because he had no idea what it meant, "I'd like to borrow your flame." And then, when Wu Jiang demanded to know how anyone knew, "Ask your benefactor, the teacher you murdered. You'll be seeing him shortly." I have never in my life seen a man come apart that fast. He stopped fighting. He started shouting questions, and a 7-colored tail came down out of the sky and put him 100 feet into the ground. He wasn't dead. That was on purpose. You cannot take a heavenly flame out of a corpse. I sealed his soul and the flame together inside his ruined body and put him in my ring, alive, asleep, for the 4 months it took to get home. That is a horrible thing to do to a person. He'd have done it to me. Out of his storage ring, my family got the Sea Heart Flame, a cauldron off the Heavenly Cauldron ranking, and every pill formula Wei Kong ever wrote down. The Douling pill, the Huangji pill, the Break Sect pill, the Earth Spirit pill, the Yin and Yang Profound Dragon pill. Those 5 formulas are the reason my family stopped dying. I came home at 15 and a half with 2 heavenly flames, a calamity poison body, a pair of triple jade green snake flower pupils, a Dozong queen bound by contract, a stolen ancient art, and a library. My grandfather sat down when I got to the 2nd flame. My mother pinched my ear and spun my head around like a wheel and demanded to know why she'd had no word for over a year, and I stood there in front of a snake queen and 2 children and a Dozong bodyguard and let her, because that is the correct thing to do. And then she looked past me at Hua Yan. I want to record that my mother's first act upon meeting the queen of the snake people, a woman who is older than her, who could level the estate, who had just come out of a fire that kills 9 in 10, was to walk over, take her hand, look her up and down with open approval, and say, "Well, you'll do." Hua Yan held out for about 4 minutes, then she teleported into her room. I came around the corner 5 minutes after that to find my mother holding hands with a 10-year-old poison girl and sighing about how cold the other one was, and I have never in my life been more frightened of anyone. That's the running problem, by the way. Everyone I know is terrified of my mother, including a queen, including me, including, eventually, a man who could destroy provinces. I gave the Sea Heart Flame to my grandfather. Both of them tried to talk me out of it. My grandfather said his talent was capped, and mine wasn't. My father agreed. I told them the truth, which they took as arrogance. Those flames were ranked 15th and 19th, and I wasn't going to bind myself to a flame outside the top 10. My grandfather nearly threw something at me. The one I actually wanted was 9th. It was called the 3000 Burning Flames, and it was sealed in a piece of sky directly above Holy Pill City by the 3 most powerful alchemists on the continent. I had a plan for it. The plan took several years and nearly killed me twice. The Pill Tower announced a public examination for core disciples. My family had a guaranteed seat. We didn't need to enter. The 3rd elder stood up in the clan hall and said we should enter anyway. Publicly, in front of everyone, because the Bai family had been getting bolder every year since my great-grandfather died, and it was time to remind them what we were. Then a woman with a soul value of 806 walked onto a stone platform in front of 40,000 people. She was 13. Cao Ying, the Cao family's demon girl. The first time I saw her, she was leaving a trade fair, and she caught me looking, and instead of being embarrassed, she laughed and waved at me like we were old friends, and Yang Tao beside me made a noise like a man being stabbed. That soul value shut the entire square up. For context, the recorded best in that generation was a little over 900, and it belonged to people 10 years older with far higher ranks. Yang Tao tested at 785 and came down the stairs looking like he'd been robbed, which annoyed every single person who had scored under 600. Then they called my name. I put my hand on the crystal. Nothing happened for about 30 seconds. I remember that specifically because the crowd started murmuring and the examining elder frowned, and I could feel him getting ready to be gentle with me. Then the space around me came apart into a soul storm, and he had to physically physically retreat. 1021, 4 digits. Nobody had ever seen 4 digits. On the platform, 3 people who between them ran the largest alchemy organization on the continent started arguing about who got to keep me, and the president of the Pill Tower ended it by simply announcing that I was already his, which is the single rudest thing I've ever seen a dignified man do in public. And down in the crowd, a 13-year-old girl who had been the strongest soul talent alive for her entire life looked up at that number, and something in her face closed. I found out later what she was thinking. She told me eventually, years later, when we were somewhere very strange. She was thinking, fine. Which brings me to the funniest thing about Chao Ying, and I say this with genuine affection. That woman spent the next 5 years turning me into her personal reason to get out of bed, and she has never once admitted it. We both became core disciples that day. So did Yang Tao, who went to the Grand Elder. So did 5 other people, because the president announced that the 3 of us didn't count against the quota, which turned 40,000 furious people into 40,000 hopeful ones in about 4 seconds, and is the best crowd management I have ever witnessed. Then I walked over to introduce myself to Chao Ying, and Yang Tao followed me, and she greeted me warmly by name and looked straight through him like he was a coat rack. He went scarlet. And I realized, about half a second too late, that this was deliberate. She wanted me to correct her, so that she could apologize prettily and sweetly and immediately, and Yang Tao could spend the rest of his life quietly resenting that I'd had to do it for him. I corrected her anyway. She apologized beautifully. She actually curtsied. Yang Tao, to his enormous credit, looked at her and said, coolly, "The young miss overstates it. I'm nobody. I don't require the gesture." And then he went off and cultivated like a man on fire for 5 years. She's very good. She isn't as good as she thinks she is at hiding it, and Yang Tao came out of that day harder than he went in, which I don't think she intended, and I know she noticed. My teacher gave me an ancient soul skill as an apprenticeship gift, and then told me I couldn't have the soul cultivation method until I was 7th rank and peak Do Huang. I said, out loud, without thinking, "That's not too difficult." He inhaled about half his beard. In my defense, I hit 7th rank in 6 months. In his defense, that was insane, and I understand now why he reacted that way. The first 7th rank pill I ever attempted exploded. The second one exploded. The third one came out perfect, and my teacher stood there and told me quietly that in 50 years he had never watched anyone correct a mistake that fast. What he didn't say, and what I found out much later, was that the reason he was standing in that room at all was that the ancestor of the Pill Tower, a 6-star Do saint who has been alive so long he changes bodies the way other people change coats, had personally investigated me 2 years earlier and told him to keep me close, because that ancestor happened to be in the neighborhood on the day a rabbit tore a hole in the sky and left. He went into the valley afterward, found nothing, found a name. He checked me for possession because his first assumption was that something very old had crawled into a child's body. He couldn't find a seam. He concluded that I was a natural aberration, told the president to watch me, and then went off to find a new body, because the rabbit had glanced at him on the way out, and that glance had cracked him. I did not know any of this. I spent those 2 years thinking I'd gotten away clean. I have never in my life gotten away clean. There was a place under the Pill Tower called the Soul Domain, and my teacher put me in it, and I lost several years. I want to explain the Soul Domain because it is the strangest thing I have ever been inside, and I still don't understand it. You sit on a lake of silver liquid on the top floor of a tower, and a half-saint who has been guarding a pond for centuries opens his eyes and looks at you, and then you sink, and then you're standing in a gray world with no energy in it at all. Not low energy, none. You cannot use fighting energy. You cannot fly without exhausting yourself. Everything you do with your soul, because your body is not actually there. And the gray mist has things in it. They start out as stitched-together nonsense. Half animal, half person, no mind, just hunger and a scream that goes off directly inside your skull. You kill them and they leave a crystal, and the crystal is pure soul power, and you swallow it and you get slightly stronger. It is, genuinely, the most boring possible version of an extraordinary experience. It's grinding. I spent months doing laps of what I eventually realized was a beginner zone and calling monsters over in groups so I could kill 12 at a time. Then I hit a wall of light at the edge of the world, and an old man in white appeared next to me and said, essentially, "You think this is all of it?" And I dropped to my knees and called him Ancestor before he could finish. He laughed and gave me a second soul skill for the bow, which I want on record as the highest hourly rate I have ever earned. Then he explained, "Past the barrier is the outer domain, The things in there are made from fragments of the souls of ancient powerhouses. They have technique, they have combat memory, they have the spirit realm, which is one full stage above where I was, and their crystals contain spiritual energy, which is the only thing in the world that turns a mortal soul into a spirit soul, and a 7th rank alchemist into an 8th. The thing my great-grandfather spent his life failing to reach. I went through the wall. The first thing I met on the other side was a man in black armor sitting on a mountain with an axe roughly the size of a door, and when he noticed me, he called me a rat. I want to note that this is a remnant soul fragment of a dead ancient warrior with no mind of its own, and it had somehow retained the ability to be insulting. My palm technique bounced straight off his armor. That was educational. My arrow technique went through it, and he screamed in a way that shook rocks apart, and then he chased me for most of a day while I shot him in the back and refused to let him touch me, because one hit from that axe would have ended me. That is the least dignified victory in this entire story, and I'd do it again. His crystal had a thread of spiritual energy in it that moved like a swimming dragon. I sat on the mountain he'd been sitting on and let it into my head. Then I did that about 40 more times. Somewhere in the middle of it, I found Chao Ying, and she was losing. She'd come into the outer domain unprepared and run straight into something that hard countered her. Her entire style is illusion, 108 copies of herself, all moving at once, all real enough to cut you. It is genuinely beautiful to watch and completely useless against something that can see through it. The thing chasing her could see through it. I got there in time to put a soul handprint in front of a crystal claw that had already frozen the air around her, grabbed her wrist, and said, "Go." She said thank you, quietly. Actually sincerely, for once, with no angle in it. I flinched because I assumed it was a trap, and she nearly killed me on the spot. We couldn't outrun it. Spirit realm souls sense each other's spiritual energy across miles, and it had locked onto me. So I told her to buy me 10 breaths. She said she could block it. I didn't believe her. She'd already tried once, alone, and stalled it long enough to escape, and when I found that out, I looked at her differently for the rest of my life. She bought me the 10 breaths. 4-fold stacked soul handprint, then the second, then 10,000 arrows at once into something that could no longer move. Afterward, she asked why her attacks couldn't scratch it and mine could, and I told her, spiritual energy. Add it to any technique and the technique becomes several times heavier. She asked if I was in the spirit realm yet. I said not quite. Then we sat down to compare notes and discovered that she thought she'd been in there for 3 years, and I thought I'd been in there for a few months. That was not a small discrepancy. That was the floor coming out. We were in the same space. We had entered on the same day. And her time and my time did not agree by a factor of 6. I have thought about that for years, and I still have no answer. There was an old man sitting above that world on a cloud, watching both of us at once through a mirror 10 yards across, and neither of us knew. I made a joke about how at least we wouldn't come out as pensioners, and she laughed, and the atmosphere between us changed permanently, and neither of us ever discussed it. Then I broke through. The spiritual energy in me hit a threshold and something knitted, and for 10 days I sat on a mountaintop in a dead world while gray fog boiled like oil, and when I stood up, I was more solid than I had been. Cao Ying said I looked like a living person for the first time. I could hear my own heartbeat in a place where I didn't have a heart. Spirit realm. I was 17. And there was a thing that came with it, which I discovered when I told Cao Ying to try her illusions on me and watched her face do something complicated. Eye of insight, inherited off the last thing I killed. It sees through everything false. Which meant that the single most dangerous woman of my generation had just permanently lost her best technique against me. And she smiled very sweetly and congratulated me. And I found out much later that she went back to her side of the fog and screamed into a rock. We hunted together after that. I helped her take her first thread of spiritual energy. Then I told her the outer domain's rules, all of them, including the one nobody had told either of us, that the spiritual energy floating free in that world is corrosive, that absorbing it makes you feel more real, and that feeling more real is exactly how it eats you. If you stop feeling like a ghost in there, you're already dead. You just haven't finished. Nobody had told her that. My teacher told me. Li Feng did not tell Cao Ying. I've never worked out whether that was an oversight or a test, and I've never asked, because I'm not certain I want the answer. I came out of that lake with a soul value over 2,500 in the spirit realm at 17 years old, and my clan had spent that time becoming something I didn't recognize. There was a dodzun in my family's guest hall, 10 dodzong retainers on the payroll, 3 of them maintaining our wormhole, the Black Fire sect, which had hunted my grandfather across a mountain range a few years earlier, had sent its sect master personally to grovel with gifts and a request for a pill. My grandfather had reached peak 7th rank and taken a seat in the Elder Council. My sister Xiao Ai had gone to Jianan Academy, taken the Star Origin pill I refined for her, switched to the Star Divination art, and come home at the top of the Outer Academy rankings, with her spine straight for the first time in her life. That pill nearly killed me, incidentally. It's the only thing in the Star Emperor's legacy that lets an ordinary person touch star power, and there were materials for exactly 3 of them, ever. My father wanted to give it to somebody strategically useful. He was right to want that. He was the family head. It was his job. I told him it was mine, not the family's, and that Xiao Ai was my sister. Refining it required more star power than exists in any accessible place on this continent, so my teacher took me into the sealed sky above Holy Pill City, into the domain where the 3,000 burning flames sleeps. And at the very last moment, with the pill 90% formed, it started to detonate. Not pill lightning, a genuine detonation, comparable to a dozong choosing to end himself and take a district with him. My teacher pinned it with a hand made of soul power, and I did the stupidest, best thing I have ever done, which was put both arms directly into the column of light. Because the pill wasn't unstable, it was hungry. There wasn't enough star power in a sealed pocket of sky to finish it, so I hauled in every scrap of starlight within 30 miles, through my own body, and poured it into the cauldron until the thing shut up and became a pill. My teacher looked at me for a long moment and then told me, calmly, that what I had just made was not a 7th rank pill. It had a spirit in it. 8th rank pills have spirits. It had been trying to feed itself. I had refined an 8th rank pill at 16 by accident and nearly died doing it. And then the dragon woke up. I felt the whole space turn over. Something opened its eyes in the deep part of that sky, enormous, coiled, wrapped in purple-black fire, and looked at me. My teacher threw me bodily out of the sky before I could see more. It took the 3 giants of the pill tower and a grand elder to put it back to sleep. Afterward, they worked out that the seal had somewhere between 10 and 15 years left, and that the flame would match them in 10, and that they needed to find it an owner before it decided to find one itself. And my teacher looked at a boy who grows on star power and started thinking. That's the setup. That's all of it. The family, the flames, the girls, the tower, the sleeping dragon over the city, the boy on the other continent whose life was about to be destroyed. Everything after this point is people trying to kill me. Let's start with the ones who almost managed it. The Hall of Souls found me first. I want to explain what the Hall of Souls is, because I've been saying the name like everyone knows, and outside the Central Plains, most people don't. Imagine an organization the size of the Pill Tower. Now imagine that instead of medicine, its business is souls. It harvests them. It has done so for longer than anyone can date, quietly in remote places, and it keeps what it takes on chains in vaults, and it drains them for power. Nobody fights them. Everybody hates them. Those 2 facts have coexisted for centuries, and that tells you everything. They came for me because I was a 7th rank alchemist under 20, and they take an interest in things like that. I lost a spatial demonic beast in that fight, a soaring serpent 6 months from full maturity that I'd raised from something thin enough to coil around my wrist, and which I had, for reasons I stand by, mounted into the underside of a custom ship so that I could arrive places dramatically. They blew it apart in the air. I got out. My grandfather's people got out. And I went home and sat in a room for a while, and then I stopped being casual about my fighting strength. Everyone had been very gently teasing me about it for years. My teacher, my grandfather, Hua Yan, every single time I opened my mouth. The alchemist who won't train. The boy who could refine a pill that raises your realm and couldn't be bothered to raise his own. They were right, and I knew they were right, and I'd been coasting on the star chart to do it for me. Not after that. I went into the soul domain again and came out at spirit realm middle stage. I pushed my fighting energy to 5-star Dozong. And then I went to my teacher's office and asked permission to go and take the dragon. He said yes, which I don't think he expected to. The 3,000 burning flames is 9th on the heavenly flame ranking. It is 30,000 feet of coiled purple-black fire in the shape of a dragon, and it is smart. That's the part people forget. Flames that high on the list have minds. Not instincts, minds. It had been sealed in a pocket of sky over Holy Pill City for centuries by the three most powerful alchemists alive, and it had spent every one of those centuries getting stronger, because it feeds on starlight, and there is a lot of starlight in the sky. I walked into its soul space and made it an offer. I said, "They can't hold you much longer, you know that, and when the seal breaks, they'll come with everything they have and put you down, because they are not going to let you loose over their city. Whoever ends up owning you, you're going to be owned, so pick the one that's useful to you." I told it what I was: star physique, star cultivation. Everything that makes it stronger makes me stronger, and everything that makes me stronger makes it stronger, and that is a better arrangement than a hole in the sky. Outside, my teacher nearly had a heart attack because the dragon woke up, and for the first time in 300 years, it didn't immediately start screaming. It thought about it for a long time. Then it said, "Fine, I'll trust you this once, take me in." And it poured itself into my body, and then it tried to take my body. I want to be very clear that I was expecting this. The moment its origin flame crossed into me, it stopped pretending. My mouth opened, and a voice that was not mine started laughing, and the flames scattered across that entire sealed sky began howling back into my body at a speed that was going to break me, because it had no intention of being my partner. It intended to wear me. It intended to hit Do Zun in a stolen body, punch out of the seal, and go to ground somewhere on a continent large enough to hide in for a century. My teacher went 1,000 yards tall and roared at it to get out of his disciple. And the flame, and I have to give it credit here, immediately said, "Old Xuan Kong, do you not want your disciple alive?" Which stopped a man who can dismantle mountains dead in the air. Meanwhile, inside my own head, where nobody could see, this was happening. 3,000 burning flames, frantically, faster, faster, faster. Me, watching my own cultivation climb 3 stars in 90 seconds off energy I had not paid for. Faster, faster, faster. Because here's what it didn't know. You do not fight an ancient heavenly flame in your own soul. That's a losing proposition for anyone alive. Unless the thing living in your soul is older than it is. The star chart had been sitting in there since the day I was born, and it had shown me a prompt the instant that dragon crossed the threshold, and the prompt said, "Perfect flame spirit body detected. Replace star diagram?" That's all. One word to answer. I let it climb. I let it take my body all the way to 9-star Dozong on stolen power, because every point of that was going into a body I fully intended to keep. And I only stopped it when it started reaching for Dozun, because that would have crippled me for a year. Then I said, yes. The star chart came out of the dark. And what came out was not a chart. It was a dragon made of stars that went on past the horizon. And the 3,000 burning flames, 30,000 feet of ancient, sentient, arrogant fire, took one look at it and remembered something. It had met that shape before. When it was young and barely awake, something enormous had looked at it and said, more or less, "Little one, you're too small. Grow a while. Maybe someday I'll take you out to see the stars," and then left a mark in it and went. That's why it had chosen a dragon shape in the first place. It had been imitating the biggest thing it had ever seen. The star dragon ate it. There was no fight. There was a wave of starlight, and the most comfortable sensation that fire had ever experienced. And then it was mine, and it was quiet, and it has been quiet ever since. I came out of that as a 1-star Do Tsun. Essence 1,000. Energy 1,000. Spirit 1,000. My physical body alone, with no fighting energy applied at all, could now go toe-to-toe with Hua Yan, who is a 7-colored sky-swallowing python with a bloodline the ancient clans respect. My teacher stood there and stared at me, and eventually said, out loud, "This does not conform to common sense." He was correct. The 2 flames fused. Starfire and the 9th flame in the world became one thing, which I named the 3,000 starry sky fire, and its power sat somewhere around 6th on that ranking. And Hua, because it inherited the growth trait from my side, Ma, it is going to keep climbing for the rest of my life. He gave me the ruined sky as a gift afterward. My private cultivation ground until it collapses. I stripped every last scrap of energy out of it in 3 months like a man licking a bowl. And I did all of that at the age of 19, and I want to say something about it that isn't triumphant. I got extremely lucky. If the flame had accepted the deal honestly, I'd have gotten a partner, and a partner is worth less than a slave. It had to betray me for me to win. It had to reach for my body for the prompt to appear. The single greatest gain of my life happened because somebody tried to rob me and picked the wrong pocket. Then I went home to keep a prize I'd made to a 10-year-old. The calamity poison body has a solution. Exactly one. It's called condensing a poison pill, and it works by gathering every scrap of toxin in the body into one solid core, after which the physique stops leaking and starts obeying. It needs 3 things. 3 heavenly flames. The core of a 7th rank heavenly poison scorpion dragon beast, and Bodhi transformation saliva. That's why nobody in recorded history has ever done it. That list is a joke. That list is a way of saying no. I had told a frightened child in a rented room in a nothing town that I would do it. She was 19 now. She had spent 9 years eating poison under my mother's supervision, in a courtyard nobody else was allowed to enter, and the last time she'd overdone it, the grass in the yard turned to ash, and my mother had to burn the air with the family's own yang fire to keep it from spreading past the walls. She had also, in that time, become quietly one of the most dangerous people on the continent, and she still made bad wound salve. I walked into Misty Valley with everything on the list. I want to be clear that this is the only genuinely good thing I have done in this entire story, and I'm going to spend a moment on it. I burned the toxin out of every meridian in her body and drove it inward, for days, while she held perfectly still and did not make a sound, because she has never once in her life complained about anything. And at the end of it, there was a pill inside her, solid, contained, hers. She opened her eyes and the 7-colored line on her body had gone still. And then she cried, which she had not done in front of me since she was 10 years old. And I had absolutely no idea what to do, and my mother came in and shoved me physically out of the room. Anyway, that's the warm part again. It gets colder again. Somewhere in there, my little sister nearly died in a city called Tianbei, and I want to tell that one properly because it's the first time I met something that outclassed me. Xiao Ai had grown up. That's the short version. Star Origin Pill, Star Divination Art, Jianan Academy, top of the Outer Academy, into the Inner Academy, and out into the world with a friend named Han Yue, whose family ran a city, and a very small, purple-haired girl named Lian Su, who ate like a warehouse fire. Lian Su was living with my family at that point. She had turned up, become instantly attached to my sisters, and demonstrated an ability to consume 7th-rank pills like fruit, and I had known exactly what she was from the first day and told nobody. She's a void ancient dragon. Royal bloodline. The dragon clans have been leaderless for 1,000 years, and she is the reason why. And she was, at that time, a 9-year-old with sticky hands who called me Big Brother when she wanted things. 3 Douzun of the Heavenly Demon Phoenix clan came to Tianbei City to take her. I need you to understand the gap here. I was a 2-star Douzun. One of them was 5-star. The Heavenly Demon Phoenix are one of the 3 great demonic beast clans, and among humans, the only reasonable comparison is the Hall of Souls. Han Yue's grandfather took a full-strength blow from a Douzun on purpose with his body so that Ur could reach the girls. He was still alive afterward, barely. I fought the 5-star myself, Eagle Elder, and the honest accounting is this. He was better than me. He stayed better than me the entire fight, and the only reason I was still standing at the end was that the 3,000 burning flames does not let me stay injured. He'd break something, and it would knit. He'd break it again, and it would knit again. I ground a 5-star Douzun to a standstill by being impossible to finish, which is not a technique, it's an insurance policy. Ur took the other 2. Both of them outranked her. Both of them ended up face down and rotting from the inside. And then space tore open, and something walked out that made all of us stop. He looked at Eagle Elder, a 5-star Douzun, one of the strongest beings in that city, and said something dismissive about mixed-feathered birds getting above themselves. Eagle Elder tried to run. He slapped him. Across 100 meters of open air, with one hand, and a 5-star Douzun went through 3 craters and did not get up. Long Min. 8-star Douzun, Void Ancient Dragon. Bodyguard, sent from East Dragon Island looking for a lost child. Lian Su, aged 9, standing in a demolished plaza with an 8-star Douzun looking directly at her, put her hands on her hips and said, "What are you looking at, you big idiot?" My sister nearly fainted. He laughed and told her she was going home. She went. She didn't want to. She went because there was a word in that sentence that she had wanted her whole life, and it was not dragon. It was home. The last thing she shouted at me before the space closed was that I still owed her a lot of pills, and she was coming back to collect. She did come back. It took years, And when she did, she was not 9 anymore, and she was not asking. I asked Long Min if I could keep the phoenixes. He looked at me like I'd asked to keep a live grenade as a pet, told me the heavenly demon phoenix clan hold grudges better than anything else alive, and then let me have them because he was annoyed with me. I refined all 3 into puppets. 3 Dozun-grade corpses, 3 heavenly demon puppets, permanently mine. And then, because I am who I am, I looked at the unconscious phoenix girl in the crater, Xiaoruo, a personal disciple of the Wind and Thunder Pavilion, who had watched the whole thing, and I left her alive. On purpose, because she had seen a void ancient dragon slap a phoenix elder into the ground, and she was going to have to explain to her clan how they lost 3 Dozun in one afternoon, and there was no version of that story where she took the blame if she could hand them a dragon instead. She reported exactly what I needed her to report. It bought me years. It did not buy me forever. 4 years later, a white-haired man came to my family's front door. I was in a sealed valley outside the city at the time, helping my younger sister Fen Ying flux with the green lotus core flame, the flame I'd pulled out of a magma sea when I was 15, sitting in a jar ever since, waiting for her to be ready for it. She'd just done it. She was standing there with green fire in her hands, and the specific expression of a person who has spent her entire life being the family's second-best alchemist and has just stopped being that. And I felt something arrive in Yi City, and I put us both there instantly. He was standing over my home, 9-star Dozun, heavenly demon phoenix. His name was Feng Hai, and he was of the same generation as the president of the Pill Tower. He said I had committed 2 crimes, that I had refined the wings of his clan, which is blasphemy, and that 3 of his clansmen had died at Tianbei, and I had been there, both of which were true. I want to describe the first exchange because it's important. I put everything I had into a fire dragon, and he swept out 1 palm without any particular effort, and I went into a mountainside hard enough to crack it, and I spat blood on the ground and understood, with total clarity, that I could not beat this person. I'd been the strongest thing in every room for 4 years. It had made me sloppy. I said something anyway, because that's a reflex I've never lost. I said, "Leave aside whether your 2 crimes are real. This is the pill domain. Do you actually think you can kill me here? Or rather, do you dare?" He said the thing that arrogant people always say. He said that before absolute strength, background and identity are illusions. And then he took his real form, a demon phoenix 1,000 yards across that turned the sky dark, and came down on me, and my grandfather's friend, the Jade Furnace Venerate, threw himself in front of it in a golden body, and I pushed the Thunder God 9 revolutions to the 4th turn and put every scrap of soul I had into a handprint, and we bought about 1.5 seconds. Then a colored pillar of light came in from the horizon and hit that phoenix in the side hard enough to crack the sky. 8 colors. Hua Yan had gone into seclusion 2 years earlier with the spine of an ancient heavenly serpent I'd found by accident and handed over without knowing what it was worth. 7-colored sky. Swallowing pythons are already a legend. 8 is a tier above. She came out of the light in her true form, larger than his, wrapped him up, and beat a 9-star Dozun into the dirt in front of my entire city. Then she shrank down, walked over, and the first thing she said, cold as always, in front of everyone, was, "Are you hurt?" I said, "No thanks to you." And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, Li Meng Yao arrived, and the 2 of them looked at each other for a while, and something happened in the air that I did not understand and immediately fled from, claiming injury. My teacher tore space open 30 seconds later, took one look at a 9-star Dozun standing in his territory, and beat him further into the ground without asking a single question first. Then he asked the questions. Feng Hai left injured and empty-handed, and my teacher told me, kindly, not to brood about being bullied on my own doorstep, and I told him I wasn't. I wasn't. In this world, strength is the only real argument. I wasn't angry, I just wrote it down. And now I have to tell you about the boy. Because while all of this was happening, on the other side of the world, the story I read in my previous life was actually happening, and it was worse than the book made it sound. Li Wei lost everything at 11. His cultivation drained away overnight. He went from the pride of his family to a joke in his own training yard, and he spent 3 years listening to people laugh at him through a door. His fiancée's family annulled the engagement publicly. His father lost the family's standing defending him, and when he finally clawed back up, the Hall of Souls took his teacher and then took his father, and by the time he made it to the Central Plains, he was a boy in black with a stone ring and nothing else. I met him at a trade fair when my sister brought him home. She'd run into him at a blood pool competition in the north, where he'd killed a Yellow Spring Pavilion disciple by pretending to help him and then hitting him instead, which I want on record as an extremely good move, and she'd liked him, and she'd invited him. And he turned out to be a serious, careful, watchful young man who had learned, very thoroughly, that nobody helps you for free. Which put me in an interesting position. Because I did want to help him, I had reasons. The continent was about to become dangerous in specific ways I knew about, and this was the one person alive guaranteed to end up standing in the way of it, and I wanted him standing there well-armed and thinking of me kindly. But if I handed him things, he would smell the angle immediately, so I did it the long way. I bought a copper plate off him. No. He bought a copper plate at a trade fair for a pill formula on nothing but a hunch and got jumped for it by the son of a sect master, and I burned that man's bodyguard's arms off and told him to go away. Then Li Wei brought the plate to me because he couldn't crack it, and I cleaned the corrosion off it with a needle of fighting energy and refined it with my flame and got 5 grains of spirit-nurturing dust, which is the single most valuable thing an alchemist can put into their own soul. And I gave him all 5. I kept the incantation hidden inside it. I want to be honest. I read the ancient soul formula off that plate and said nothing. But the dust was worth more, and I handed it over without hesitating, and I watched him decide, visibly, that he'd been wrong about me. Then I told him where his teacher was. Wanghun Mountain Range, northwest. A Hall of Souls branch hall, 5 dodzun on the surface, and a mountain of fog and stone-eating ants that has killed everyone who ever went in. And he did the smart thing, which was not ask me for help. He knew the pill tower would never openly break with the Hall of Souls over one old man. He didn't insult me by asking. So I helped him without being asked, and I did it in a way I'm going to describe honestly because it's the single best piece of work in my life, and it is not a nice piece of work. He needed 4 dodzun. He had 1, Cloud Sage, who couldn't leave his own sect. I found him 4. Steel Edge Venerable, who owed his teacher a debt. The Shadow and Light Wolves, 2 hermits who'd fused with the blood of an extinct beast 60 years ago, had been hunted by the Hall of Souls ever since, and had been stuck at the same realm for decades because their bloodline was impure. I found them because a 9-year-old snake girl mentioned seeing something strange in the beast region. I offered to fix their bloodline with pills refined from dozun-grade phoenix blood, which I had, because I'd been carrying 3 phoenix corpses around for 4 years. They said yes within a day. And the 5th was a man in a black robe who never showed his face, and that was Celestial Blaze Sage, whom I had personally pulled out of a storage ring and given a new body, and who is bound to my family for the rest of his existence. 4 of the 5 men on that raid were mine. Li Wei didn't know. He still doesn't fully know. And here's the actual operation. Hua Yan had already found the branch hall, weeks earlier, alone. She did it by going through the stone-devouring demonic ants, not around them. She's an 8-colored python, ants bow. So on the night, the Shadow and Light Wolves turned into 100-yard beasts and drove an ocean of ants straight at the front door, which forced the Hall of Souls to send people out. Li Wei went in the front, loudly, as the visible raid leader, exactly as everyone expected, cutting his way toward the vault where his teacher was chained. And behind him, invisible, moving through folded space, a small girl walked into the deepest part of that hall and stole the soul origin. Hundreds of thousands of souls, harvested over years, refined into one core. Everything that place was for. Lian Su cleared Li Wei's path the whole way in, and he never saw her once. And when he had his teacher and was running, and the black-robed Douzun who'd been waiting the entire time, the one who had used Wei Kang as bait for years specifically to catch Li Wei, moved to take them both, an invisible wall of solidified space stopped a 5-star Douzun cold, and he never found out what did it. Then my fire thunderbolts went off inside the vault, and the Shadow and Light Wolves ants went through what was left, and Celestial Blaze Sage put up a 5-formation fire array and detonated it, and half a mountain range stopped existing. 1 Hall of Souls elder died, 2 lost arms. Li Wei got his teacher back, and he thinks he did it, and in the ways that count, he did. He walked into that building alone, and he pulled that man off a chain with his own hands. I got a core made of 100,000 souls, which took me a full year to clean of other people's dying, and which pushed my soul into the heaven realm. Both of those things are true at once. I've made my peace with it. The heaven realm is where the soul stops being a resource and starts being a person. Once you're there, your body can die, and you don't. You can possess. You can reincarnate. The ancestor of the pill tower has been doing exactly that for so long that nobody alive has seen his real face. My teacher spent 100 years trying to touch it and never did. I got there at 22, sitting on a mountain outside Holy Pill City, absorbing a light that was made of other people's deaths, while a queen stood guard over me for a year without being asked to. When I came out, the whole city felt it. My teacher flew over, watched the sky bend, and started seriously considering retirement. And there was a little version of me standing in my own mind, made of soul, with its eyes open. I said I'd come back to Yang Tao, so here it is. 2 things happened while I was in that year of seclusion. The first is that Gao Xuan's little sister grew up, Ming Yu, the child I'd met at a trade fair when she was 7, hiding behind her brother, terrified of touching anyone, because anything she touched had its soul drained out through the contact. She'd killed a playmate that way at 4 years old, and sealed herself away from the world afterward, permanently, so that it couldn't happen again. Her family made her gloves. That's all anyone could do for her. I ran into her and her brother in the Pill Tower's trade hall, and Gao Xuan admitted, half proud and half desperate, that she'd broken into the spirit realm on her own, which put her past every alchemist in her family except the Ancestor, and that nobody left alive in the Dan clan could teach her anything. So I said I'd do it. I want to note that this was a favor to a friend and not a scheme. It's one of maybe 4 things in this account that I did without a second reason. She refined a peak 7th rank pill for me to watch, and when the pill lightning came down, she couldn't stand up under it, and she fell, and I caught her arm. Bare hand, no glove. She screamed at me not to, and nothing happened. I have never worked out why. It's the only thing on this continent that has ever simply refused to explain itself to me. She looked at me, and I looked at her, and both of us had exactly the same expression, and neither of us said the thing we were thinking. She had never been touched by another human being in her entire life. I put my hand on her hair, which is a thing an older brother does, and she closed her eyes and clenched her fists and let me, and I felt like the worst person in the world without being able to name why. Then I told her the actual problem. Her soul was going to eat her body. Not metaphorically. Somewhere in the next decade, her physical form was going to fail, and she would be left as a soul with no vessel, and the only cure for that is refining a new body, which costs you your foundation and your future forever. So I made her a Hunyuan body sculpting pill, 8th rank, 4-colored pill lightning. It took 10 days, and I did it without a cauldron, using my own flame as the vessel, and both she and Chao Ying watched the whole thing and came out of it looking like they'd been slapped. It rebuilt her from the inside. She broke through to Dozong on the strength of the change alone. And the second thing that happened is that Chao Ying and Ming Yu met. I'd like to say I engineered that. I didn't. I stood between them and watched 2 of the most talented alchemists of a generation take one look at each other and silently agree to spend the next several years trying to destroy one another, and I have never felt more like a piece of furniture. 2 years later, at the Pill Convention, they refined against each other in front of the entire continent and both produced 4-colored pill lightning, and Cao Ying won by a margin so thin the judges had to be told what it was. I was the judge. I want that on record. My teacher and his colleague conspired to make me judge that specific competition, in public, between those 2 specific women, and I have never forgiven either of them. Ming Yu coughed blood into her own cauldron to get there, broke the cauldron, nearly killed herself. That shy girl has more spite in her than anyone I know, and she keeps it under about 4 layers of good manners. Also at that convention, quietly, in the middle rank, Li Wei and Yang Tao both produced 2-colored pill lightning, which made them 8th rank grandmasters at an age when that shouldn't be possible. 4 young 8th rank grandmasters at one gathering. There'd been none in 100 years. Yang Tao, incidentally, took 2nd place in that pairing and conceded immediately and cleanly and without sulking, which is the exact opposite of the man he was at 19, and I think about that a lot. The Pill Tower had a secret above the Pill Tower. I found out about it when I decided I wanted to be a candidate for one of the 3 seats. I could have won it the easy way. Winning the pill convention makes you a candidate automatically, and I would have won that convention without breathing hard. I told my teacher I'd rather do it the hard way. He asked if I'd thought it through. I said if there's no challenge, the process gets boring, and the woman in the Cheongsam laughed and voted yes on the spot. The little pill tower is a world folded into a wall on the top floor. You walk through a stone surface and come out on a mountain 10,000 feet high, and the whole mountain is covered in medicine gardens growing things that do not exist outside, tended by old men in farmers' clothes who don't look up when the president of the pill tower walks past. Not one magnificent hall, stone huts, that's it. These are the strongest alchemists alive, and they live in sheds because a nicer building wouldn't improve their success rate. 10 elders run it. The 3 giants are the junior members. My teacher warned me not to steal anything, twice, and then his colleague warned me again because apparently my face does something when I look at rare herbs. The Grand Elder set the test himself, and all 7 of the others turned up to watch, which had never happened for a candidacy assessment in living memory. Nobody knew why. I did, or I thought I did. The test was, refine something we all agree is good. That's it. That's the whole standard. Deliberately, viciously vague, because any one of them could refuse to be satisfied. So I refined a 6-yang supreme pill. 8th rank, 6-colored pill lightning, hundreds of ingredients going into the cauldron simultaneously, which means running 100 separate temperature curves in your head at once. 10 days. And when the 6-colored lightning came down, I did something that made my own teacher swear out loud. I took it with my body, not shielded, not deflected. I stood there and let 6-colored pill lightning, each strike carrying the force of a 5-star dodzun, hit me directly, because I was cultivating the Thunder God 9 revolutions, and lightning is the only thing that feeds it. It hurt in a way I still don't have words for. It knocked me numb after 3 strikes. I had to throw my flame up as a shield because it was coming faster than I could absorb. But when it stopped, I was at the 5th revolution, and I could raise my own strength by 2 full stars at will. And the pill came out in the shape of a golden crow, which means supreme grade, which means the best possible result. The Grand Elder held it up and said that if my teacher had made it himself, it wouldn't have been much better. Then he handed it around the other 7 so they could tell me everything I'd done wrong, which they did, in detail, for an hour, and it was the most useful hour of my life. I passed unanimously. And afterward, alone, my teacher told me why all 10 of them had come. Because the ancestor of the pill tower had told them to watch me. Because of a rabbit. Because of a hole in the sky I'd made when I was 14 years old and thought nobody had seen. That was the moment I understood I had never been operating unobserved. Not once. Not for a day. The Hall of Souls came for Starfall Pavilion with everything. I want to set this scene properly because it's the end of the middle of my life. Wei Kong had been resurrected. I refined his body myself, with a leg bone from a Do Saint skeleton that I'd found in a ruin in the Beast region and given to Li Wei for free, and it worked better than anyone expected. He came out of it a half-saint, which nobody had planned for, and which changed the balance of the entire southern Central Plains. But he came out 3 days late. Because the day before he woke up, the Hall of Souls arrived over Starfall Pavilion with 5 heavenly venerates and several dozen elders and protectors, and announced they were going to bathe the place in blood. Cloud Sage, who is a gentle man, turned to me and said calmly that when the fighting started, I should grab Wei Kong and Li Wei and run and preserve the spark. Everyone in that pavilion had already decided to die. I'd been in seclusion in their meteorite for 10 days. I want to admit something. I had drained about 70% of the star power out of the stone their entire sect is built on, which shortened the lifespan of their home by roughly a century. And Cloud Sage knew and said nothing because he needed me more than he needed the century. I'd used it to light the dragon's spine, 12 star palaces, 3,300 star essence, and what came out the other side was not a technique. I stepped out of the formation alone and told them all to stay back and just make sure nobody escapes. Cloud Sage's face, in that moment, was the face of a man watching a child walk out to negotiate with a landslide. The Hall of Souls asked if I was surrendering. I said I'd give them a chance to surrender instead. They said I'd been frightened stupid, and I said, with genuine regret, that they'd just wasted the only good offer they were going to get. Dragon Soul True Body. The sky came apart. What came through it was a heavenly dragon in gold, with natural patterns written into its scales, a top-tier divine beast of the dragon clans of the Great Thousand Worlds, second only to a true dragon, at Do Saint strength, for exactly 1 minute. Every demonic beast within 10,000 miles went flat on the ground and put its head in the dirt. It roared once, and dozens of Hall of Souls elders came apart into red mist. The black and white heavenly venerates crushed their emergency talismans and opened a channel straight to 2 of the 9 heavenly venerates of the human hall, both peak 8-star Dozun, both of whom were mid-sentence about how useless everyone else is. Then the dragon's aura went through the portal. And those 2 of the 9 strongest people in an organization that terrifies the entire continent, shattered their own channel from the other side, immediately, together, because they were afraid it would come through. The dragon flicked its tail. A mountain range that had stood for 10,000 years became a plain. 1 minute. 10 days of accumulated star essence for 1 minute. And it will take me another 10 days to pay for it, and I would spend it again tomorrow. Cloud Sage bowed to me in front of his entire sect and pledged the pavilion. I tried to refuse and got nowhere. 3 days later, Wei Kong woke up a half-saint, and the news of both things went across the continent in a week. There was, at that moment, a coalition forming against my family in the north. Tianming sect, Wind and Thunder Pavilion, Ice River Valley. They'd worked out that the Ye family's expansion up there was our own project, and not the Pill Towers, which meant they could hit us without consequences. They were 3 days from signing. They heard about the Tianxing mountain range, went home without discussing it, and never mentioned it to each other again. That is the single most satisfying paragraph in my life, and it took me 23 years to earn it. Then my teacher resigned. All 3 of them did, at once, in a room with the entire Elder Council. Zhou Qingzi stood up and said he was stepping down and handing the Pill Tower to me, and before anyone could react, the other 2 said they were stepping down as well, which was not the plan and which visibly annoyed him. There was an objection, a reasonable one. 3 giants exist so that no single person holds that much power. Give it all to one man, and the whole structure becomes something else. And Li Fang answered it, and the answer was that the other 2 successors would be ready within 10 years, meaning Cao Ying, meaning Ming Yu or Yang Tao, meaning the 4 of us, who'd been sharpening each other since we were teenagers, were going to run the largest alchemy organization on the continent together, and had been being aimed at that for years without being told. And then my grandfather stood up. He had spent his entire life fighting to get the Ye family's seat on that council back. He'd gotten it. He was sitting in it. And he gave it up. Voluntarily. On the spot. So that nobody could say the new president's family held a vote as well. I didn't get to argue. It was done before I could open my mouth. I have never in my life been prouder of anyone than I was of that old man in that room. Afterward, I asked my teacher why, honestly, he was doing this. I told him I wasn't sure I could run it. He told me, cheerfully, that the job is very relaxing and that he mostly reads formulas in his office. He is a liar. He'd been in that chair for a century. The entire organization was arranged around his hands. I was inheriting a machine and none of the calluses. But I said yes, and I said yes for a reason I didn't tell him. The Star Emperor had warned me about what's coming. And the Pill Tower is the largest concentration of power on this continent that isn't already owned by something inhuman. And when the sky opens, I intend to be the one holding it. My mother's reaction to the news was to shriek, grab my head, stop halfway, and put her hands behind her back. She said she couldn't be seen manhandling the chairman of the Pill Tower. It would damage my image. I took her hands and put them back on my head and told her that I'm the chairman of the Pill Tower everywhere else and her son here. She cried. I'm including that. Then I went to Dragon Island, and I nearly died, and I want to tell you about that last, because it's where this stops being my story. Lian Su came back for her debt, the way she said she would, not personally. Long Min turned up in Misty Valley, sweating, and said the old men had sent him. She'd eaten the Dragon Phoenix origin fruit. I'd found it for her. In a Doe Saint's ruin in the Beast region, inside a beast spirit shield that only royal dragon blood can open, growing on the corpses of an ancient void dragon and an ancient heavenly phoenix that had killed each other there in the age before history. The heavenly demon Phoenix clan turned up to take it, and Hua Yan erased a dozen of them with one strike of her tail and tied their 5-star elder into a parcel. I gave the fruit to Lian Su, and the dragon corpse to the dragon tomb because it belonged there, and I kept the phoenix, and I suppressed its residual soul myself for half an hour with star power because I am not sentimental about phoenixes. And then she ate it, and her body could not hold it. The energy crystallized, all of it. Inside her and outside her, a shell of clear ice from her scalp to her feet, and no life in her at all. They'd been sitting there for months watching a girl not die and not live. I burned that crystal off her for a month. A volcano, a jade cauldron 100 feet across, and my flame going into it hour after hour after hour without stopping, because the moment you stop, the crystal reseals. I drank ancient dragon blood to keep my energy up. Energy wasn't the problem. The problem was the concentration. 1 month of unbroken flame control at that precision, which is harder than any pill I have ever refined. By day 20, my eyes were solid red and I was seeing sounds. And of course, that's when the other 3 Dragon Islands attacked. West and South came openly, with armies, and pinned the East Dragon Island Elder in the air, and North sent 1 man around the back, to me, while I was blind and burning and could not have blocked a thrown rock. He stood over me and told me to stop the flame, and he'd spare my life. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. I was 3 hours from the end of a month. He raised his hand, and the cauldron opened. What came out of it was not a little girl. It was a woman in a purple gold dragon robe, with a dragon and a phoenix moving on it like they were alive, with 10-foot wings and an aura that went out across the entire island and put both armies flat on their faces in the dirt at the same instant. The Dragon Emperor, not a king. The dragon clans have had 3 kings for 1,000 years, squabbling, and the reason they've had 3 kings is that they haven't had one of these. She hit the man from North Dragon Island with a bolt of purple gold light before he could finish the gesture and threw him across the sky. Then she turned to the massed elite of 3 islands and told them, calmly, that they had 10 breaths to leave, and that the Void Ancient Dragon Clan has never had kings, only an emperor, and that she would be coming personally to collect the royal blood the 3 of them are carrying. They left. Fast. And then she came down and knelt beside me, and I was lying on stone with my eyes bleeding, and she asked if I was all right in a completely different voice from the one she'd just used on an army. I said it was nothing. Mental exhaustion. A few days' rest. She picked me up. The elder who'd been fighting for his island's survival 10 minutes earlier took one look, physically sealed Long Min's mouth shut with fighting energy, and dragged him away without a word. And she kissed me. I want to be extremely clear that I was not prepared for this and that I had known her since she was a 9-year-old who stole food. But it wasn't what it looked like. Or it wasn't only that. A golden warmth went into me through it and rebuilt something, dragon phoenix power, straight from the source, and I woke up hours later on a bed I destroyed by leaning on it. 1,000 points of physique, 1,000 points of strength. And the Dragon Phoenix Ancient Armor, which is the highest grade of the scale armor every Void Ancient Dragon can call, and which means an 8 or 9-star Dozun can hit me, and I will be irritated. She'd gone straight back into seclusion. She hasn't finished absorbing that fruit. She won't for a long time. Before I left, I asked the Elder where the Void Lightning Pool was. He tried to talk me out of it, told me it holds black demon lightning, the kind that only appears when someone tries to refine a 9th-rank pill, and that even he wouldn't be careless in there. I went in anyway, because the Thunder God 9 Revolutions was at the 7th turn, and I wanted the 9th. I want to tell you what a thunder pool is like from the inside. It is a lake 1,000 feet across with no water in it. It is full of lightning, standing, moving, alive. My clothes burned off in the first second. My skin went black in patches and healed and went black again. I put my 14 demon puppets in first and let the lightning hammer them like a forge, and they drank it and got stronger and started turning gold. Then I sat down and opened myself up and let it in. Half a month. 36 jong of Thunder God body when it finally came. My body grew until it stopped, silver lightning written across it, and I looked like something out of a bad legend. And then the pool got angry. The clouds above it started turning, and something came down out of the vortex that was 100 yards of lightning shaped like a python, with black scales, which meant it was on its way to becoming black demon lightning. And I want to describe my response, because I've thought about it since, and I don't fully recognize the person who did it. I grabbed it by the neck with both hands and bit its head off. Crunchy. Chicken. That's a lie. It had no taste at all, and it went down my throat like liquid and burned. I ate the entire thing in half an hour, all 100 yards. Then I burped black smoke, and my whole body ached, and I was a 7-star Dozun. I do not have an explanation for that. Nobody sane does this. I was 20-something years old and standing in a lake of lightning, eating a storm because it had annoyed me. What I do have is this. I left that pool with the 9 revolutions complete, 3 layers of defense, and the honest ability to fight anything below half-saint and not particularly care. And behind me, as I flew out, the pool detonated. I didn't see it. I found out later. Something came out of the deep part. A silver-haired man, in tatters, running, with more than a dozen bolts of true black demon lightning coming after him like hounds. He'd been in there the whole time, deeper than me, doing something. And the reason the pool went berserk and nearly killed him was the disturbance somebody had caused near the surface. I have no idea who he is. He has no idea who I am. He is now somewhere out in the endless void with a very specific grudge and no name to attach it to. I'd like to say I'm not worried about it, so here's where I am. I'm the chairman of the Pill Tower. In a month, there's a ceremony, and every hidden sect on the continent is going to be in Holy Pill City to watch it, and they've already started arriving. Old men who were declared dead a century ago, walking out of caves to attend, because when the Pill Tower changes hands, everyone who might one day need an 8th rank pill wants to be remembered fondly. The Earth Travel Sect showed up early and handed me a token to the space trading meet personally, which nobody could explain, including my teacher, who has one and had to be given it as a gift to the institution. My family has moved into Holy Pill City. My grandfather is an 8th rank Grandmaster. My little sister runs a flame the color of green jade. My other sister has a heaven rank cultivation art and a temper. My mother has finally stopped trying to arrange my marriages, which I don't trust for a second. Hua Yen is at the peak of 8-star Dozun and 1 push from 9. Yuer has a poison pill and a full night's sleep. Anhua has an army of dragon-blooded serpents and a 9-headed heavenly serpent tattooed across her back that she is slowly, patiently winning an argument with. Cao Ying is the pill convention champion and still, as of last month, refuses to concede a single point to me about anything. Lian Su is the Dragon Emperor, and she is going to war with 3 kings, and she will win, and when she does, I will be standing behind her. And I am, apparently, going to have to do something about the spirit-devouring clan. That's the thing the Star Emperor's echo told me, in an ancient starry sky, in a boulder, in a valley, when I was 15 years old and too weak to understand what I was hearing. There was an invasion. In the ancient era, something came into this world from the great thousand worlds, the higher plane, the real one, the place my continent is a footnote to, and the fighting Qi continent fought it for 1,000 years and lost more than a dozen Do-Di doing it, and won, sort of. They couldn't get rid of them. They drove them under and let them take root because there was no other option left. The spirit-devouring clan. They eat souls. They eat fighting energy. They eat flesh. I told the Star Emperor's echo they'd gone extinct, and he shrugged, and I felt very clever for about 4 seconds. They have not gone extinct. I know exactly which organization on this continent harvests souls at industrial scale, in secret, in vaults, and has done so for longer than anyone can date, and is backed by a clan that nobody has ever properly seen. I know what's in those vaults, because I stole one, and now I own the only institution on this continent big enough to stand in front of that, and I have been handed it by 3 tired people who thought they were giving me a promotion. So, ask me again in 10 years whether I still think being born lucky was the good part. There's a ceremony in a month. There are old monsters walking into my city. There's a man in the void with a grudge and a memory of my disturbance. There's a Phoenix clan with my name on a list, and a hall of souls that lost a mountain range and a soul origin and has finally worked out who took them. And somewhere out past the boundary of everything, there is a rabbit, going home, who looked back once on his way out. He remembered my face. I've been counting on it.